Good evening. Welcome to CB8 Speaks. My name is Sophia James. I'm a member of Community Board 8 in Manhattan, which covers the Upper East Side from 59th to 96th Street and Roosevelt Island. Our guest today will offer personal perspective as a new Community Board 8 member. We will learn what inspired her participation and what she enjoys most about participating on Community Board 8. This is the first interview on our Up Close series, Get to Know Your Community Board Members. Allison Kopf, recently appointed in April 2014. She serves as co-chair of the brand new technology committee. Allison manages real estate and government relations for Bright Farms, a leading urban agriculture company. She's a lifelong New Yorker and has been on the Upper East Side for the last 4 years. She most frequents the parks in the district. She enjoys running and plays on a few softball leagues during the warmer months. She loves downtown, uptown, a great coffee shop with great people and where she can get some work done in the late night. So Allison, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us what led you to want to participate in Community Board.
So as you mentioned, I work for a company called Bright Farms. We're a startup company and we've been around since 2011. But I bring that up because my job is to work with the equivalent of community boards across the country and to interact with people who are really passionate about their communities, just like members of Community Board 8, and to try and work with them in order to make development projects work for them. And what I noticed was people weren't necessarily doing that on with our community board. And I was having projects coming in my neighborhood that were affecting me and my neighbors, and we weren't having the opportunity to have an input. And it was really only because I didn't know that there was a venue, Community Board 8, to have that input. And so I researched, I talked to the borough president and her staff and a lot of other folks who knew what community boards were and who are really big activists in getting younger people involved. And I decided to make the leap and get involved this last year.
Excellent. That's good to know that you did such in-depth research, because people don't really have an understanding of what it means to be part of a community board.
I think I was mostly just nervous about not knowing how it worked, and I wanted to make sure I jumped in and knew how it worked and if I was the right person for it too. It's also, a little bit like a job interview where it may work for the board, but it doesn't work for you, and vice versa, where you really want to be a part, but you have to be in it for the right reasons.
Absolutely. So what do you feel, having been involved for several months already, what should be of great concern to the community board, and what are the few priorities that matter to you?
Sure. I'll start with myself. As one of the younger members of the community board and a new member, I really care very passionately about what makes young people able to grow roots here. I haven't lived here for 40 years because I haven't been alive for 40 years. And so, but that doesn't mean I have any weaker intention to grow up, to spend the rest of my life here and to put down roots and to have a family here. And what that means is being able to afford the place I live,
of course.
Having viable and speedy transportation options so I can get to work on time and efficiently and safely. Being safe and being able to walk in my neighborhood and not feel alarmed, having a business and being able to grow that sustainably. And so generally I think of the concerns of the Upper East Side as the things that make me, the reason I moved here and how do I stay here.
What are 2 to 3 accomplishments you would want to achieve while you're a member of the Community Board 8?
Oh goodness, no more paper packets. Yeah, as the new co-chair of this brand new technology committee, I think we have a phenomenal amount of room to grow here. And we've talked a little bit about some of the challenges that we're going to face from introducing technology, from switching to technology, from adding technology. But a lot of the things that we haven't yet talked about, and because it's a new committee we haven't gotten to yet, are how we incorporate things like data. So I would love, the borough president and our council member, Ben Kalos, are huge proponents of open data and trying to incorporate more open data platforms. And it's spurred really a technological movement among the civic hacker community in Manhattan. There's organizations like Beta NYC that have spurred to create these data sets that can help exactly folks like community board members understand not only socially what's going on in your district, but from a quantitative standpoint, what's happening. And we can use that data to better understand how we should vote on things like transportation proposals that are coming through. So I think, one thing I would love to see is incorporating more data sets into how we're thinking about proposals that come through. And the second, I joked, but realistically getting more of our information available online, but also accessible. And so we've talked about some of the challenges about making data both available online, but also accessible to everyone. And so dealing with that is going to be something that I'd like to see happen.
That is one of the challenges, how we're going to integrate innovative technology platforms. So how do you think we will go about convincing other board members to go that route?
Oh, sure. I think it's less of a convincing and more of a sharing the value. There's a learning curve to technology, and so we have to focus our priorities. One of the things we did as a community, because we're brand new, we're having our first meeting next week, and one of the things we did was solicit feedback from the board and say, hey, tell us what you'd love to see from a technology standpoint, or how could we do better to make your life better? How could we, increase the amount of digital presence, or the digital presence that we have? How could we change up the infrastructure from a technology standpoint and get presentations on during board meetings? How can what should we be thinking of? And we had everything run the gamut from suggestions from, we have projectors at most of our meeting spaces. Should we be using them to put up presentations so people can see them, as opposed to sometimes where we have paper in front of us? So architects and designers will come in with paper and actually put it on a podium, instead getting it digitally done so everyone in the boardroom can see, as opposed to the first few rows. And to things like, how do we communicate with the public better and explain what we're doing from a communication standpoint, but through technology. And so I think the challenge isn't necessarily convincing members. They're on board. We had a lot of ideas. It's more about focusing our priorities and then finding the right solutions, because technology is, it's myriad in its solutions. So finding good solutions that help us become more efficient.
Right, because technology can definitely be a wide span, and just knowing how to focus that information is important. You already spoke about a little bit of how to integrate these platforms in the community board, but what improvements would you like to see? Just, I guess, go a little deeper into what improvements that the future could be for a community board.
Sure. I think one of the biggest things is going to be what I mentioned earlier with the data sets. And I can give you a really good example. I was playing around with some of the data today, just because I was interested in seeing what data sets were open. And there were two specifically I was looking at. One, and both came out of the open data law that Borough President passed when she was a councilwoman. And the second came out of the Beta NYC hacker community. And it's called Mean Streets. And it publishes data about the accidents that led to deaths at various intersections, and it pulls all of that data. And we've talked about this a number of times. Councilman Ben Kalos is really concerned about how we keep our streets safer. Community board members are very concerned about how we keep our streets safer. And it's one way to identify, here are the targeted intersections that don't work for bicyclists. Here are the targeted intersections that don't work for pedestrians. Let's dig into why they don't work, and then let's target policies or proposals around that data. So let's not have buses going where bikers have an intersection across. Let's not have let's have longer countdown times on the walkers where pedestrians are getting struck, and let's try and innovate ways to make that better. Another data set is the Cool Roofs data set that identifies where in the city there is potential to, or where there's the biggest threat to urban heat island effect, and the temperatures are rising throughout the city. We can cut down on that, and the Upper East Side has one of the largest pollution rates in the entire city, the largest pollution rate in the entire city. We can cut down on that by doing things like painting roofs white. So how does the technology committee get involved? We can help identify and map the roofs on the Upper East Side that are available to do that, and then work as a budget priority to get some funding through the Cool Roofs program so that we can actually do that and make a change directly in our community.
There are resources in the community, because there is also the White Roof Project that will do it for free.
Exactly.
Volunteers that paint roofs.
Yes.
So I definitely think that's an important concept. Sort of moving forward with, okay, now we have community board members on board. What experiences have you had in terms of difference of opinions. And what type of advice would you give people interested in joining the community board on how can they voice their perspective without getting angry or feeling insulted? How can we have a sort of a unified vision and get everyone's thoughts across?
Sure. I think when you have a large group of people who are dealing with the issues who affect me and my neighbor to my right, my neighbor to my left, you're going to have a differing of opinions. It's 50 volunteer board members who are dedicating their time because they care about their community. Right. So there's guaranteed to be a differing of opinion at some point. My biggest advice, and going back, I actually think it's hugely important that there's a differing of opinions because of the fact that we're a diverse community. My biggest piece of advice for new members is to listen. We have a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge on this board, and one of the first things I did as a new member was sit back and listen, because it's really important to understand the history of some of the things we're voting on. A lot of things have backgrounds that we voted on something before, we voted on something similar before, we've had this as a priority before. So understanding the history of what you're discussing, be involved and take the initiative to do research on your own and understand the issue. And 3, speak up. If it's an issue that matters to you, speak up, because nobody's going to speak up for you. And so everybody should have an opinion, because it's the fact that it affects you.
And continuing with how we can get our thoughts across and that approach, and I think that was a very thoughtful answer. What qualities should a board member possess if they're also interested? And also, I guess you should share with those who are interested in joining a community board what type of commitment is required.
It is a large commitment, and it is all, again, volunteers who work. So it's definitely not necessarily a challenge, but an added feature to your schedule. Board meetings are once a month. We also have land use meetings once a month that involved everything from zoning and developers who are interested in building new buildings. We'll have zoning changes and things like that. You're also required to join a minimum of 2 committees. We encourage you to join several more, like Sophia. And so there's an added time benefit to getting as involved as you want to get beyond that. In terms of qualities for a board member, I think most importantly, having a desire to get involved is the biggest. It is a time commitment, and you're talking about issues that if you're not interested in these issues, you're certainly not going to want to be sitting in a room for 3 hours with people discussing them. So having a desire to get involved and wanting to be involved with these issues is first. I would say having a keen understanding of the neighborhood is also important. I thought I knew the Upper East Side phenomenally well until I got involved with community board, and now every nook and cranny I'm like, hey, that could be public space. Hey, this is a new bike route. So I think it's phenomenally fun to learn new things about the Upper East Side, but also having an understanding of the community and what the community's concerns are is definitely important. And I think third is something we don't often talk about. People do often talk about wanting to get involved and taking an initiative, but having a technical understanding of what is happening, everything from zoning requirements and zoning laws and liquor licenses and the process of government approval all come through us. So having an understanding of the things that are happening and how those processes work helps you have a stronger impact. And so there are trainings you can do. The Borough President's Office offers trainings on those types of things, but definitely having some of that background coming into it makes your ability to step up stronger.
Thank you so much, Allison, for sharing with us. I definitely appreciate you coming to speak on as a new member.
My pleasure.
And if you're interested in serving our community board, there's more information that you can find on our CBA website. Community boards are city agencies, each with a district office, a staff, and 50 volunteer members who are appointed by the borough president. Half of the appointments are based on city council members' recommendations. The other half are direct appointees of the mayor and borough president. Thank you again, Allison.